Hi, everybody. Sorry we're a little bit late. We are having some technical issues, so bear with us. Hopefully it works well during the process today. I just want to welcome you to part 2 of the Autism Book Club. We are going to be going over chapters 3 and 4. And I'm really excited for those of you who have joined us. Welcome to people that have been here and also the new people. Please do, if you have the opportunity to watch us live, comment and ask questions. We want your engagement. And even if you can't do it live, do it in the Autism Experience group. That is where some of the more exciting even conversations are happening after we do the broadcast. So I welcome you to do that at any point. And welcome, Connie. Always great to have you here. Is there anything you want to say to get us going?
Well, it's great to be here. I'm in beautiful Sedona. And, I know we're going to get into the chapters 3 and 4. But, I'm guided in this very moment to say something about chapter 1, about the family dynamics that's been on my mind. And what was mentioned was that Gayle did not have enough mom time to spread around to the other family members, and that the siblings, Demetrio, Trinka, and Andy, they sacrificed a lot of their typical teenage activities to help Lyrica in her day-to-day activities. And this is important because there are so many other siblings out there that do this. And I love how Gayle said in that chapter, they are the glue. The children, the siblings, were the glue that held the family together. That is so important. And I just want to let the siblings know today out there that you have planted such a beautiful seed that I see. An example of that seed would be, Daniel's in some activities and there's always young volunteers, and I'm nosy, so I'll go, hey, what got you into wanting to be a little volunteer? And they say, I have a special needs sister or brother, or, I have a sister with autism, and that is a seed of love that was planted by those beautiful hearts. So I just want to say thank you and just give honor to the siblings of the autistics and special needs and all that. So very important. I just want to get that off my chest.
I am so glad you touched on that. That was actually the first thing I had on my list to comment on today. Don't you love that synchronicity? I've got tears of joy here. I had a little bit of a chat with Lyrica's dad between the times, and he did mention them, and I was thinking, we really do need to highlight and thank them, because they're such a big part of this journey as well, just because they're not the ones with the focus on them. They are that glue, they are that support system, and they did it beautifully. Those three, and still do, I'm sure, just supported in their own ways, and they play their own role by being their authentic selves in this whole game that we're doing here. And I wanted to touch on that too, because I was fascinated by this TED Talk I saw a while back, where a woman she was talking about these siblings, calling them the glass child, because she had a special needs brother, and she felt like she was glass in the sense that she was kind of see-through in a lot of ways. And I know that as a parent, it's so easy to be able to really hyper focus on one child, especially when they have these extra needs. And so I think that it's an interesting theory, but it's also something that can be embraced in this much more amazing way, where they are highlighted in this as well and acknowledged. So thank you for bringing that up, because I completely agree. It couldn't happen without this. And I've seen, even after reading chapters 3 and 4 again, how with Lyrica's journey, her whole mission in this life, if it weren't for her family, she wouldn't be able to do it. So huge applause and kudos to mom and dad and the siblings and the extended family. I love how grandparents come to play into this as well, even after they've crossed over. So really beautiful. Thanks for touching on that. Great. So let's see. Do you have anything else that you need to get off your chest? Or shall I dive in?
Dive in.
All right. So I wanted to touch a little bit on what you had mentioned about this book being like a second awakening. Because as I was reading again, I was thinking, you know what, this has kind of been the same thing for me without even realizing it, you know, because it really took my spiritual journey into this depth and understanding that I hadn't had before. And especially, we'll get into this a little bit later, kind of towards the end of chapter 4, where Gayle describes things, you know, like the light body and that sort of stuff. And as I was reading that, I was like, wow, this is so accurate. You know, it's kind of one of those things that I don't know where I got the information specifically from, but everything that she talks about in regards to the spiritual aspects of the self, essentially. You know, we see ourselves as these human vessels, but there's so much more to us. And that's what I feel like the big part of this message is from autism is to, you know, because you look at them on the physical level and you say, well, how are they supposed to be our evolution? How are they supposed to be leading us into the new earth? But the reality is they're opening us up to this whole amazing other side of ourselves that we don't even tap into on a societal level. You know, it's kind of been saved and set aside for religion, for example. But now, as we are really living and building the new earth today, you know, we've been in that new age for a long time, but we're really transitioning into this place of magnificence where there's so many options for magic and the mystical and the things that we shut down at some point because it just wasn't working. But now all of the lines are open for that. The veils are thinning, and we have the ability to really recognize this whole other side to us that helps us to find that happiness, to find that joy, to find that peace and purpose in our life. So that was something that was really important to me. And the thing that has always awe-inspired me about Gayle is her faith, you know, her trust in going into that inner space to ask for that guidance and to not really push it. You know, I really, really appreciate that. And I respect and honor it because I'm a total mental person, you know, and even though my heart is open and I grow upon that, and I know that that leads me in the right places, it's easy to fall back into those places of doing things the mental way. And so just reading these little inspirations and parts in the book where she talks about how that faith in herself and her inner knowing, and then she would wait for the sign, you know, and even though like that weekend she was talking about how she had this opportunity to have financial stability and a PhD, you know, all of this looked like the right way to go. And she spent her whole Christmas vacation and still didn't have the answer. And then, so she started to drive in that direction, just thinking, okay, this is the way I need to go. But then the heart opened and the tears poured. And she knew, I need to go back to Nashville and I need to go spend my time with these autistics because this is where my heart is. So amazing. That was a really good thing for me.
And it's interesting you touched on that because Gayle I noticed in that chapter 3, Adult Living, one of the things that's mentioned in that chapter is that Gayle found Grace Works, and that's where she developed her strong spiritual core. And it's also the place where Lyrica received like some private counseling sessions, and that's when her writings took a change to spiritual. And I loved how they said Lyrica went from her mind to her heart during that time. So when I read that, I kind of caught that around the same time period, they both came into their spirituality and to their inner knowing. And it was just so beautiful. And that's, of course, where Gayle, at Graceworks she got to be she was ordained as a metaphysical minister. So that's really cool.
Yes, yes. That's perfect, Connie, because I was just looking on the first page here, how she talks about it was time once again to let go and honor the process of individuation that both our souls clearly needed. And she's just talking about, Lyrica stepping onto her part. This is kind of in the physical, she wanted to live independently, and that was a decision she needed to make. And then also Gayle was going her direction on her spiritual path. And that's something that has really inspired me about this story. Is I think about Lyrica, and I think about, how she's so tapped into this profound, very vast experience of unity, consciousness, and oneness, and, connection directly with source. And how does that happen? Because it's my understanding that, autistics generally have that kind of open pathway because they're not necessarily living so rooted in this physical world like many of us, typical humans, whatever you want to call us. But I know, and I noticed that her spiritual journey in itself has enhanced what she says and her message. And I can see that, what it does is it brings her from this level where often people will see them like, oh, they're a mystic. She's an autistic mystic. She has all these amazing things that she comes through with, this information, that all of this, this love energy and this frequency. Yes. However, she's not above us, and I know that she would absolutely agree with that. Because we tend to do that. We see someone that we think is more spiritually advanced than us or further on the ascension process. And so therefore we tend to put them up on a pedestal in some ways. It's not so much about putting them there. It's where we end up putting ourselves because we put them there. You know what I mean? So I really think that it's important to, to recognize that she's just as much a human in form, spirit in form, having an evolutionary experience as well, even though.
Yes, and I actually like how she said, this is Lyrica, she says, I needed the ways, speaking of living in her own home and supported living, she said, I needed the ways of the world to touch me. I needed the draining ways of the world. Living with mom was optimum. I'm not saying that it was all perfect, like I didn't go through anything, but it was so optimum and perfect. I needed the rough ways. And that was interesting to me to read that, because you're right. At times, especially last year, I was really bad with, that they're higher up there, and taking their human element away. But the truth is they have that human element, because that is a very, I'm going to go say something. Usually it's funny because I've known several typical teenagers who don't want to leave the house. You have Lyrica saying, hey, I need to fly the coop. This is my decision. I need to do this. So that's very interesting.
Connie?
Yes.
Can you repeat that last bit? It cut off for me. I don't know if it cut off for the recording. So you said, Lyrica said, I'm going to fly the coop. And that's where I lost you for a second. It just froze up.
Yeah, this thought was interesting that she said that she's, she didn't use the words fly the coop, but she's, hey, I'm getting out of the house. This is my decision, and a lot of typical teenagers, they're not ready to leave the house. And here she is, she's saying, hey, I'm ready to go. I need to, to experience the world in my own way. And of course, during that time, that's when they grew so beautifully during that time.
Yes, and to echo what you were saying about how she spoke about having to experience the hard ways. I mean, often we see that when we're going through the pain and sorrow and the emotional distress and the releasing, essentially, that Gayle touches upon, for us to get into this different way of being in existence, we need to release and let go of all of the density that we have been living for however long. And the thing that is super important is to recognize that these things have to surface. They have to almost kind of pass through our awareness, our consciousness. And I can say through my own work that that's what I've seen is as challenging as it is to look at those things. It's kind of like talk therapy. You know, you don't want to look at that again. You don't want to go and experience that again, but you don't have to fully experience it. But it is something that has to pass through your awareness. And our problem is we tend to wrestle with it and be like, oh, what is this again? I thought I dealt with this, but we really just kind of shoved it down. So, you know, if we can just recognize those hard ways as stepping stones, things that need to pass through, and oh, isn't that interesting that that's back again, or something like that, you know, and embrace it the way Lyrica did. I think that, you know, we could really learn a lot from that particular experience. There's something I wanted to touch on or ask a question of, maybe you've had an experience with this, and it was in regards to the EPT, the emotional polarity technique. I looked that up and it was really fascinating to watch. There was a few videos and how they were doing it, the process, because, you know, I feel very deeply as an empath that a lot of our dis-ease or disease in this world, in our human bodies, is because we don't know how to process emotions. You know, we know how to stuff them down really well, and we know how to not allow them. But, you know, what kind of world would we live in if we just allowed emotional expression? You know, I mean, think about the tantrums that we experience with our kids, no matter who they are, and the tantrums we go through as adults. You know, if we could just not even are allowed to express them, pretty much, or at least feel them, you know, without beating ourselves up about it. So I thought it was really interesting, though, how the magnets, which are a part of that modality, didn't work. And it kind of made me think about how there are some things on the physical level that don't work for those with autism. Have you experienced any of that sort of thing with Daniel? I'm really curious to understand that a little better, because there are certain things that work for us typical humans that really don't work for them. And I have a feeling that it might be they're a little beyond that, or I don't know. What do you think?
Yes, and I think Gail mentioned that with transference healing, that she noticed that their frequency is like already up there. It's already accessing. I have had the experience of attempting to use bars. I don't know if you've ever heard of bars from Access Consciousness on Daniel, and he doesn't seem to respond to it. So I can agree with that. Like I do believe that they do respond to spiritual teachings, but as far as healings, I haven't found one that Daniel will respond to, besides me touching him a certain way on his neck, you know.
Wow, that is really incredible. I'm familiar with bars. I've had a session done on myself. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And that's something that still remains a mystery to me in a lot of ways. And I'm totally fascinated by it because, you know, my understanding is there is this lack of embodiment, lack of integration that's happening there. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing, you know? My work with awesomeism, you know, Susie Miller has been doing for a few years now, at least 2 years, this thing called the Autism Intention. I think it's called the Healing Experience. I know they might have changed the name slightly, but she works with this renowned scientist named Dr. Tiller, William Tiller, and he's, I believe, a scientist through Stanford, and he started kind of simultaneously with a spiritual practice and meditation and that sort of thing, and he was able to scientifically capture data and utilize a machine that projects intention. So it's really cool because they project this intention, and for this particular experiment, they were doing it with families that had people with autism in it. And the intention was to have a soul integration, but it was all based on the soul directive. So if, for example, that particular soul didn't have their directive to be embodied, then that wasn't necessarily going to happen. So I thought that that was really interesting. Now, some people did, some children did start to speak, and different things like that have happened from it. So it's really interesting. I think that what we have to remember is this is really also about this journey, this human evolution, is understanding that each of us have a bit of an individuation, an individuality, that a soul is directing that particular life experience. And so it may not be that we heal through this particular modality that worked for somebody else. So I think that's really awesome that just touching him really does a lot, and especially on a particular place. Did he tell you where to touch him?
Well, he does. He places my hand exactly where he wants it and the pressure he wants it.
That's awesome. I love it. What else do you have for me, Connie?
Well, I did want to talk about Lyrica's decision to go to adult home living and that process, because it took them, if I'm not mistaken, about a year to advocate and fight for this. And we all know how that is, to fight the system and everything. But what I thought was interesting was after they won the decision, okay, because of a protocol, entrance protocol, Lyrica had to have psychological testing. And in this psychological testing, she did her facilitated communication with Gayle. And then they get a letter saying, oh, you don't qualify because Lyrica's IQ is way above mental retardation. And that part of the story gets my goat, but it also is very interesting, because you wonder, wow, they're so intelligent on, writing, but then they still need help with the life skills or with danger issues, keeping them safe, whatever. And I just thought that was interesting how they just did that. But thankfully, after a few months of advocacy, that the services were reinstated. But it was just interesting that she had to go through that. And that to me shows how the majority of society will look at the autistics just like that. Like I don't understand. You're so bright when you're writing, but you need help doing everything else. You know what I'm trying to say? It's that we got to get out of that thinking and open our minds up to these new light chargers that have come here to light the way for us. So I just thought to mention that, because that's a huge part right there.
Yes. Yeah. I actually, it's interesting because I posed that question. I recognize that we choose our body, we choose our parents, we choose this life experience for whatever reason, maybe only the soul really knows. But I did ask, that question came to mind, why choose a body that doesn't function, for example? And maybe it's an experience. I feel like there are those leaps and bounds that some people have made with their children. Sometimes it takes however many years for them to potty train and that sort of thing, but they get there. There is a point. I also feel that what's coming to mind actually is a quote that Gayle recently kind of intuited, that she mentioned in one of her more recent interviews, that autism is a riddle to be solved while the family evolves. So I know for my life, it's the same thing with my kids. When I make those quantum leaps, or if I take those steps and I heal in certain ways, and I stop focusing on the things that I think matter, but really aren't the most important things that matter, that's when those things change. So I believe that it's, even though there's these individual experiences that we're having, it is a familial process, or perhaps a process that isn't specific to parent-child. It could have to do with the caregiver that person's spending a lot of time with, I I think that that has a lot to do with it. And the answer that came to is you choose it because it catches attention. You know, it's one thing to be magnificent and informed, but that's where we're going. You know, we're all going there. So we have some growing pains that we need to go through to get there. So that's kind of what I got from that.
Amy? Yes, Daniel actually recently said that on the board just recently, that we have to go through some more growing pains, but we're getting there. We're getting there.
I love that confirmation. Yeah, you know, talking about this, which she said, you know, I needed the power plays and energy draining waves of the world. I just put, you know, my notes are, that's the school of life. And that was the direction I took. And instead of going to college, I did take a few college classes, and I was so lost and I was not happy and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but my heart was kind of leading me to Colorado, and that's where I ended up. The school of life has taught me so much. You know, it's taught me so much more than I could have learned in a classroom. You know, sometimes that's just regurgitated information. It's not necessarily something that's coming from that inner place. And I think it really has a lot to do with how we see ourselves. And you see that reflected in Lyrica's writing, you know, where she talks about, here, I'll just read a little bit of this one part. Had to go to non-intellectual life to lose my mind's top focus on thinking. My high school spirit experience seeded thoughts of college. Wanted to become a fast learner to outrun my disability. But thinking was all wrong. My autism was much greater ability yet to be bored. I had to let go of dream of college when I went into supported living. Also canceled reading program. In the space not filled, we were led into our new spiritual work. That is when I began to see the saving ways under God's plan. And that speaks measures, because, you know, we get so intellectual and we make these things that are so important, you know, achieving and going out and getting a job and making money and survival, essentially. That's what the focus is. But the focus in this other journey that we're reading about is beautiful, because they're talking about following the heart and following, you know, what God, what source, you know, what that inner being is saying the direction is best for us to go. And ultimately, I think time and time again, I see it proved that it's the best direction for everyone involved. But we're taught through religion, I know for me specifically, but in a lot of beliefs, that, you know, you don't be selfish. But it's not selfish to work on the self, you know, to really get to know the self, so that that direct guidance is clear.
Yes, and that's a very important lesson right there that I have learned on this journey with Daniel, is you got to tap inside yourself. A lot of people, they say, oh, I'll do that all the time. No, you don't. You have, because when you tap inside yourself, sometimes some emotions, like things that from the past, come up when and you have to address it, and because it's coming up for cleansing. And that's been a huge part of my journey with Daniel, is that inner going inside, you know. And another thing is, it's interesting that you touched upon what Lyrica said about had to go to intellectual thinking. I was going to bring that up because I loved how she said, but thinking was all wrong. Because as soon as I read that, I immediately thought of Access Consciousness little motto. They say, if you're thinking, you're stinking. You know, because sometimes your mind gets in the way of the heart. So this is heart-centered. The mind is, you know, ego, you know. You got to be careful with that mind. The mind is, we're not going to throw the mind out, but we have to be careful with that mind and just kind of focus more on the heart. Let that heart do the thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so funny. Because there's another twist on that, where someone has said it's your stinking thinking that's gotten you where you are, you know, and that's usually not a place you want to be. And Gayle does touch on that. You know, she touches on how she got into that space of where she was allowing the heart to lead and the mind to follow, because you're right, the mind is a very important facet of our being, but we tend to allow it to lead the game, you know, and it does that because it's been in survival mode. So it's doing what it can to protect and, you know, kind of actually embracing the fear. And that's another thing that she touches on, is that it's about moving from fear into love. I think that's a really, you know, that's a consistent underlying message that is throughout this whole story as well. And I like too how Sarah was typing with Gayle, and she says, or she would just, whenever she typed, I only type important things. And somebody says, what do you want for lunch? And she says, I only type important things.
I'd like to touch on that. That's very interesting, because with that, well, I know what Daniel, he doesn't really like to talk about what I want for lunch. I mean, he will at times, but the majority of his conversation is spiritual. It's not anything like, and that goes with Sarah. I only talk about important things. That's what she's saying. She only wants to talk about spirit, what she feels is important. So I thought that was an interesting message to get out, because a lot of parents out there, or caretakers, they may want to see FC as, oh, I just want you to tell me what your wants and needs are. And that's may not be where the autistic wants to go with that. They want to talk their high level spirit talk, and that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, because anytime that Lyrica speaks, I listen, you know, or not just Lyrica, you know, there's another friend that I have that she's got a little girl, Sarah, that started to type and speak, and the things she says are profound, very important, and not a lot, but enough to just, it melts you into your heart. You know, it's beautiful, the things that they say, and they say it at the right time. This is the thing that fascinates me. We can get into the mind talking a little bit, because you know, here it is, them showing their human place, their human aspect. So Lyrica would try to get in and mind talk with, I believe it was like Leslie or Sarah, you know, one of them was a little resistant to it at first. And the words, it's fun, the words that Lyrica uses, or at least used to use. I don't know if she still does, but, you know, certain things like doll and guest to describe emptiness of one living in one's persona. And I love that description of doll. It's so appropriate, you know, and the doll to me is kind of like a puppet. You know, you're being this kind of empty identity that isn't really you. And I think that Gayle touches on that as well when she does that little poem about the coat rack. Absolutely, you know, this is this part of us, you know, this that we identify with. We identify with, this is who I am. But like I spoke about before, that other part of us that really is who we are, that infinite, that impermanent part of us. I'm sorry, the permanent part of us. The impermanent part is the part that we identify with. And that is a part that we are shedding. That's the stuff that's coming up to the surface. And so if we allow all of that to happen, it's incredible to see what's going to occur. And so back to what I was saying about, I think it was Leslie who wouldn't let her get in. That was the pain. That was the experience of someone not seeing her, someone not willing to be open to the fact that she was this magnificent being in this shell of silence. So I thought that was really cool, that even they showed in their stories how it was like, you know what, I don't want to do this, but she pushed enough and she got into her heart, and then she was okay with it after that.
And it makes it very interesting, because a lot of people may think that, oh, okay, so now I believe the autistics can telepathically talk and do this, but that means they all like to do it. No, not necessarily, because, you know, Leslie fought back. She wasn't so welcome to that. And another thing is, I like how Lyrica used the term, I like to mention yodeling to other autistic minds. And I love when they yodel back. And I couldn't help but to think about a recent experience with Daniel that came out on the autism experience page on, was it Facebook, where, you know, I take it as mind yodeling. The young gentleman from Peru last year, when I just really believe him and Daniel have been mind yodeling or mind talking back to and forth, which is how he was able to speak to me last year. And I know you are familiar with the story that's on Facebook, and I just cannot believe that happened. You know, talk about mind yodeling. I mean, we're crossing the USA from Peru to Texas. That's a mind yodel for, if you ever want to talk about a mind yodel. I mean,
Absolutely, absolutely. That story was phenomenal. For anybody who hasn't seen that yet, go into the Autism Experience Group Facebook page. And the post was originally started by Milena. And Milena started out, I think it was something like, I really feel drawn to share this message. And she shares about her nephew, who we find out later in the thread. It's an awesome thread to watch it unfold, because it happens as we're reading it. You know, because then Connie chimes in and was like, wait a minute, you know, I talked to him, and, you know, Milena and Connie don't know each other. This is a really incredible revealing of this capacity that these individuals are teaching us. And it's like Gayle said in here. She said that, let's see, Lyrica's experience in responding to spiritual teaching and counseling supported my belief that individuals with autism are endowed with a high spiritual aptitude. So many times in their presence, I knew that I was a student and she was the teacher. Absolutely. And I also feel like probably one of the reasons, because Lyrica touches on that. She touches on the fact that she could hear what other people were thinking. And could you imagine that? Can you imagine hearing what everybody's thinking? You know, you would want to turn some of that off after a while, because my goodness, you know.
well, she did write, and I thought this was so cute. She said, having no voice to talk put me in a lone place. When I was little, jump high to pick up loot inside private person. That sounds like something I'd like to do, to pick up the loot inside of a private person. But yeah, so she did have a little fun with it. So can you imagine that, you know? And that's one of the things I had on my realization with Daniel. When I realized that he was telepathic, I started watching what I was thinking around him, because I would catch him looking at me. I have a certain thought, and he just look at me a certain way. And I'm like, oops, I'm sorry, I forgot that you can actually read my thoughts. So it's really, I just love it. But
well, Connie, you're experiencing that right now every day, where somebody is reading your thoughts and you can't read his necessarily all that well just yet. You know, you can maybe you tap into it, you can hear him. I think you probably hear him more than you realize. It's part of the process, but it teaches you probably to be a lot more conscious about what you're thinking, doesn't it?
yes, it does. And that's the new earth, you know, our thoughts are loving, and because otherwise, you know, we're blocked from it. It's, you know, that's why we're going into our heart. We're stepping, and I'm doing that more and more on this journey. And I really appreciate this, because like I've said before, I'm coming in this from this is new experience. And you mentioned my second awakening earlier. And Daniel was not like Lyrica, where he started writing spiritual because he had that spiritual teaching. He actually opened us up in 2011 just to our first awakening. But the funny thing is we didn't know it was him until last year. So that is a very interesting story in itself. And then of course the autism book was the second awakening, because it helped me understand Daniel's role from 2011. It was so profound. It's so profound. So yeah.
That's so cool. It's like you went back and probably had all these flashbacks the past, what was it, like 3-4 years, you know, you know, aha after aha as time went.
Yes, and this includes just visions of, you know, when my husband would walk the dog during this time that the oil was created, that Daniel was the muse for. You know, he would see things like a chair turn into a wolf. And, you know, to know that Daniel was behind those types of things is very hard to wrap your mind around, because it's very sci-fi, but it is something that did happen.
I believe it. I believe it. You know, that kind of segues a little bit, jumps me forward actually in some of the highlights that I made in regards to when Gayle was talking about the element, the spirit of the animals and that sort of thing. That speaks really deeply to my heart because in my studies and in my passions, you know, as a child, I loved fairies. You know, I loved the whole idea of that and stuff. And what I remember is that wasn't real to me. Like it was just a fantasy thing. And she even touches on that. Ooh, let me see if I can find the page where she talks about it, because gosh, it's so true. You know, it's like she talks about the children and how we basically are deprived of that experience. But what an important experience. Here it is. It's on page, she starts on page 50 down at the bottom, and she talks about, let's see, like the concept of the goddess, elementals play an important role in our story unfolding. An element is an invisible force, energy, that exists within the world of nature. Many dismiss the elemental kingdom as mere fantasy. Others push it away due to the stigma often placed upon by society's institutions. How sad, especially for children who are chided for this contact made and shared. To the skeptic, the word elemental can be translated to mean simply the energy of nature that blesses us in infinite ways. And what I want to share with everybody about that is, you know, the nature intelligences, we are a part of that. That is something that we work hand in hand as co-creators, but we don't realize that we do. And it's really fascinating how you can, if you just acknowledge them, especially now with the veils being so thin, acknowledge them, however it is that you acknowledge them, the fairies, the devas. You know, I was playing with that with my garden this year because I learned that concept where not only do you acknowledge them, but you ask them to do their job. So you can call upon the carrot deva to infuse their energy into the seed and to grow this thing. And where I learned some of that from was, you know, Findhorn is something that was out in Scotland that happened. And these people were following their inner guidance and through meditation and just listening to their connections with spirit. And they grew 2-pound strawberries. I can't even imagine what that looks like. And this is back in like the 50s, 60s. It was a long time ago, out of sand. The ground there wasn't even fertile, but they were shown what to do. Go get this manure here. And they had nothing. They didn't even have a job. The guy kept trying to get jobs, but for some reason, someone even said, "Do you think God's preventing you from getting a job?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think he is," you know, because it never would happen. And then they would turn around and the resource that they needed was there. So there's something to be noted there. You know, if we can really put full force our faith, I can see how some people have done that in their lives. And it's something to be noticed instead of looked at as quacky, you know, because we are co-creating and we don't even realize that we are. And so I believe that's where we're going with the new earth, is to recognize that we have this amazing power to create that we can use consciously.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the elementals, because with the oil that Daniel-ism used for, it was a lot of help from the elemental kingdom, particularly a little gnome. And that sounds cuckoo, doesn't it? But it's true. That helped with the earth magic of it. So very true, the elementals. And you know what? I was the type that if you told me an elemental 5 years ago, I'd have been like, what are you smoking? Because that's the TV, you know, get the snap back into reality. But the truth is, what is reality? It's what we say. It's our belief system, you know, and we got to deprogram from it. That's all. Deprogram with love from it, because the elemental kingdom, I'm here to tell you, Miss Logical here, I've seen it. It does exist, and and they are here to help us, and they were a part of helping to create the oil as well. They provided guidance.
I will be excited to hear that story. I love the depth of those. And we'll be hearing more from Connie eventually. You know, we'll do some side interviews so that you guys can hear a little bit more about, the oil and different things, because I think it's time that people can hear about it, and it's fascinating and it's really exciting.
Oh, we have can you hear me, Amy? You have Lori here. Do you see the, hi, ladies. I love the Sedona backdrop. Wow, such a powerful conversation. I'm sitting back in awe. I'm glad this information about the gifts of autism and mind talking is being shared. Presumed intelligence. So much to learn from the non-verbal autistics. We love you, Lori.
Yes, we do. Thank you, Lori. Thank you for commenting. We appreciate hearing from you. What Lori's doing is awesome. She is the founder of the Gifts of Autism, and she highlights all of those gifts, which there are so many. So if any of you are or are not connected or have not heard of her, she's got a very large Facebook group with, gosh, it's like an over 7,000 number in community. And she's also getting ready to do some interviews on her new YouTube channel and that sort of thing. So you got to go check her. Join us, Lori. Your energy is valued. And she's also one of the Chrysalis Gold Hearts, one of the original women who came together to support this movement of autism into the world, kind of into really showing and sharing what this message is. And it's been quite the unfolding, and I think it's only really starting to launch in a way that is much bigger than it has over the past few years. I wanted to go back to that part. It's on page 45. It's the poem that Gayle wrote, A Coat Rack Empty and Waiting. This part, it says, we have been wearing this suit as our identity, clinging to it passionately and defending it fiercely. And I just think that it's so relevant. One of the teachings that I have embraced talks about how we often wear coats, and we put these coats on. I mean, literally, those are the words that were used, these garments that are given to us. And they're given to us by people that love us with loving intentions. But they're not ours. They're not even anything that that really identify us, but we become identified with them, and we put them on, and we're wearing these layers and layers of heavy coats that really shroud our light. I look at often the human being as this lantern, and we all have that light inside of us, but we get that dust and we get the soot, or we get the coats put on us, and we're not really even sure how to shine that light or take it off. And so I love the analogy that she uses here of the coat rack waiting. You can just hang it up piece by piece. It's like peeling that onion. You give it time, and there gets a point where the releasing isn't as difficult, because you know how good you feel after releasing. So, it makes you keep at it and stay with it. And to go with the cuckoo stuff, I mean, the stuff that sounds cuckoo to me, actually, it does something to me that validates. It validates something inside of me that I can't quite put into words. Something that I felt ever since I was a child, but because of my environment and those around me that weren't able to embrace those ideas because they had worn so many coats to that point. Because I believe we all come in with this knowing, and it's really simple how quickly it can get shut down. But I also think that the process of turning it back on can be really simple as well. So yeah, I love the cuckoo stuff, all of it. Unicorns, rainbows. It's feel-good stuff, isn't it?
It is, and it's affirmation and validations as well, because I have a joke with my husband. I said, in 2011, it was just our cuckoo-ness. I said, now we're reading all these other people that are just as cuckoo as we are. But it's not cuckoo. It's just that we are seeing a new world. We are open. We are taking off, as Gayle said, we're taking off some of our coats, and we're open to these experiences. So we may sound cuckoo to everybody else, but it's not cuckoo.
No, and I believe it's going to be a lot more mainstream, and it probably is a little more mainstream than we even realize at this point, because I don't know about you, but I think, quite frankly, the human race is tired of being in fear, is tired of being in struggle. And that's why we're seeing all of the uprising in this world happening. You know, the structures are crashing down. And there's something really important that I want to impart here, because as I was reading, especially chapter 4, I really want to encourage anybody who has not read that part to embrace and just be open to what Gayle's talking about, as far as, you know, kind of the capacity of who we are and what we're capable of. Because if you can tap into that, you can even almost feel it, becomes palatable. And I think that the place that jumpstarts it, that can affirm some of this, was this letter from Debbie Runyons. And she wrote it to Lyrica because she had she'd read what Lyrica had written, which was, want to change my life wasn't easy. Wanting to change my life wasn't easy. Wonderful. I want to know all your truth. Please keep writing and help me to see through your senses. I love that. Help me to see through your senses. You have much to teach normal people, and I believe that there are many who want to learn from you. Have faith in your voice, for no one else can tell this story as beautifully. Oh my God, I so agree. And yeah, I think that it's important for us to focus on that sort of thing, kind of the thing that Debbie's saying. You know, she's encouraging her to speak the truth, autism truth, whatever it is that's coming from her heart, because that's part of that love letter to humanity that this is. You know, it helps us to see that there's this beautiful sensory world, inner and out, that we can explore and embrace. And what we focus on really does matter. So as we notice the things that are happening that are kind of crumbling down, the chaos that's happening around us, I think the important thing right now, especially those of us that are conscious and aware that our thoughts create our reality, and we can collectively do this together, is to really focus on what is good and what is right and what we want to see. You know, I think that chimes that whole be the change you want to be in the world, want to see in the world, hugely. And I think this time in history is a very important time to do that.
Agreed. And one thing is that Daniel has told me before that you cannot be angry at mankind's anger. And, that's going within as well, that we just love with our heart. We love everyone, and you're absolutely correct with that. And there was something else I was wanting to mention that Gayle wrote here on page 44. And she says, I believe that my friends, the autistics, are prophets of a new age, a return to the primacy of spirit. I see them as individuals who are incredibly gifted as spiritual beings, but ill-equipped as human beings. I think that was just the perfect way to say it, because that is so true when I see them, and it's always a treat to listen to what they have to say. But then when you're watching them in their day-to-day activities, they are ill-equipped. Particularly Daniel, who does a lot of screaming, does a lot of stemming. You really can't take him out to the store; it's too much for him. We really have to be mindful of the energy of places with Daniel. And I don't think that I think it's very useful information for other parents and caretakers who are not familiar with this, because they may not understand it, just think, oh, you're just being autistic, but it's the energies, and it's very important to understand how the energy flow in this journey when you're opening up to the autistics and their gifts.
That is perfect that you touched on that, Connie. That was something that I had written down here I wanted to go over, because first of all, did you notice how Gayle she's in this place of faith and trust. So she's the modalities that came to her. And the thing that I thought was different, a little bit different on how what we see today, because autism is so prevalent now. You know, there's so many therapies and healing modalities and diets and all of these things that you can do to fix these people. But she didn't do that. That wasn't her intention when she came across these healing modalities. She recognized that there was healing that was required there, but she also went from that place of she needed healing and we needed healing. She wasn't looking to specifically heal Lyrica and the other autistic individuals. She saw them as equals. She saw them as equals as the rest of us normal human beings. I don't think that she ever felt that there was this special needs even necessarily, even though there were needs that were needing to be met. There was no emphasis on that, which sometimes in certain systems, like school systems and that sort of thing, there is a requirement to point out that these individuals have special needs, because like you brought up, you can't bring somebody like that into a place and force them to fit in. And that's part of their message that I love. And I think it's even comical sometimes, even though it's, you know, maybe not meant to be funny, but how it's like, okay, I'm not going in there because I had an experience in there where somebody wasn't honest with me. One of my friend's sons did that, and he refuses to go into a particular store because he had an interaction with an individual in there who was joking around with him, but he saw straight through it and thought the guy was lying to him. You know, he was just trying to be fun and playful with kids. So it was interesting, you know, how they really do break this entire paradigm of understanding that it's not just about what we see, you know, and there's this intelligence, this wisdom that they have that is really teaching us if we're willing to just slow down and learn from them and listen. And you're right. I mean, the energy is crazy all over the place. You know, you go out into the world and it's extremely intense, you know, especially like, you know, rush hour at the grocery store, and even just the fluorescent lights I know have a pretty profound effect on them. I'm not really sure what's going on there, but you know what just came to my mind is part of the system of conduction that works in fluorescent lighting, there's mercury in that. And there was somebody, there's a woman, Dr. Meg Blackburn, and she's written the books, Children of Now, Conversation with the Children of Now Evolution. So she's had a lot of telepathic communication and physical communication with a lot of these kids. And they'll say to her, what's been shown to her is that mercury, so in the vaccines, there's mercury in some of the vaccines, it actually is literally a conductor, and it takes their body, their essence, and it pulls it away from their body because the mercury's in the body. So I thought that's really fascinating. I don't even know where that came from. That just came out of nowhere. But really interesting, because there are all of these things that we're experiencing in our environments and stuff. And that's what they're here to show us is, you know, what's not working. And with their sensitivities, it's a gift to us to recognize that this isn't working. Instead of the toxicity coming into our bodies, which we're able to somewhat purge, they do have a challenge with that sometimes, often. So, you know, it's important for us to say, okay, instead of accepting these chemicals, let's do what we can to eradicate them because they're not necessary. Let's go back to what's natural. You know, we've got all of these things are made from actually nature. You know, the drugs, the pharmaceuticals are made from nature. And can you imagine if a scientist is creating a drug, for example, from a plant, and they're working with the deva of that plant? Can you imagine what they would create? You know, instead of creating it from a place of, oh, we need to make some money, we need to support this medical system that we've put in place, you know, it would be really fascinating to see what that'd be. And I think we will someday get to experience that, because everybody eventually at some point is going to remember who they are and what they're capable of.
You're absolutely right, Amy. It's coming. It's coming. And you know, the Autism Collective, I'm going to put it out there. The Autism Collective is ready, and I'm here to tell folks, pay attention to the autistics. Pay attention, because there's going to be some things coming out about them. Just remember I'm saying this, okay? I'm making a prediction.
I love it. I think you probably have some information that can really back that up, but that'll be revealed eventually. Connie's in Sedona. I'll just touch on this really quick. She's in Sedona because she's brought Daniel together with Lyrica and their friend Adri, and the three of them are a trinity. Dare I say a holy trinity. They're amazing when they come together in the physical, and they do plenty of playing in the non-physical. But this New Earth Academy is really, it's starting to grow. I think it's in a period of perhaps incubation right now, where they're coming together in the physical, which I know is a challenge. Let's not forget that it's a challenge. I get it. I get that parents do need to examine and test out and see what it is that they can utilize to support or help their children. But something I want to emphasize is what this story really teaches us is it's not really about fixing even yourself. It's not about fixing your children. It's about opening your heart. And I happen to know someone that told me a story about that, how, she did a lot of the things that were kind of, some of the traditional things that she was led to try, diet, different things like that. But it was interesting because after a struggle with that, and another friend I know that's an awesomeism practitioner, she calls it the hamster wheel, the autism hamster wheel, because you're just running as fast as you can, and you got people coming and going out of your house, therapists, and you've got it's more than a work day, the hours that somebody or you are working with your child. Now, I know that there's some of those things are necessary, so I'm not negating any of it. But she said that when she let go of most of those things, if not all of it, and just kind of was like, you know what, I'm not going to try to fix anymore. And that may not have been her words. Her child opened up to her. And I see that time and time again, actually, with the work with awesomeism. We see that a lot, where when the parent finally sees that there's nothing broken and they just open their heart and they're like, I'm here, I'm ready, and I'm listening. What comes through? So you're right. I mean, listen even to that silence, because it's rich, isn't it?
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because that is, reading the autism book is what I started seeing changes in Daniel just after reading the book. And no therapies, nothing like that. Just, I feel me reading the book, he said, oh, okay, now you see me, Mom. Now you're getting it, huh? And that was enough. That was enough. And every day I see something different in him. And it's absolutely amazing.
Hence again, that line, the riddle to be solved while the family evolves. I want to touch on that just a little bit, before we kind of start to wrap stuff up here, because I think it's a really important message. It's something that has been showing up for me a lot lately, even though it's kind of been an underlying current of things kind of through my whole journey with all of this. And that is, it's really about that self-development, and it's really the development of that beautiful self, that self that we have yet to really explore. I will say that when Gayle starts to kind of do her rundown of the light body and the spiritual aspects of the body, that starts on page 51. So go check that out again, read it a few times, because it kind of takes you into that space of awe, which is wonderful and beautiful, and something you can tap into at any point. And it reminds you of kind of where we're all capable of going. And I've seen that in my own children. I've seen that in other people and their stories about their children, is when they stop. Even one of the practitioners that I know was saying something about how she stopped parenting. And I loved that she said that. It kind of reminded me, what I can do. Because if my focus is on, yes, taking care of my children and loving them, most importantly, that's all they need from me. They don't need me to wash their face. They don't need me to make sure they brush their teeth properly. Yeah, those things are there, you know, but they get done without a lot of hyper focus. And I think that there is a lot of focus on that, you know. We're always focusing on the body because we don't want to perhaps have to take care of more than just our own. I don't know. It's all part of, you know, child rearing. But the more important thing is when we run into our challenges that we notice in our children, the best place I've always found that I find the best solutions is I go within and I notice it within myself. And when I really resolve that issue, it's not even an issue for them. And it's funny because they don't do it consciously. They just are acting out the energy of the situation. So it's something to just to recognize, you know, and to just keep moving with and to be open and listen. Get out of our minds and back into our hearts.
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because a lot of times when I go inside, and like I said before, I'm doing it a lot lately. When I go inside, I find that a lot of my fears, a lot of my judgments are all belief systems that are, I hate to say it, enslaved belief systems, but they are. And I recognize and I go, oh my goodness, aha, you know, I got a belief system going on. I'm scared of a belief system. Okay, I'll cleanse that. That's, you know, right and wrong, good and bad, pot, pock, all nine, short spoons, beyonds, and clear it. You know, that's what access consciousness lingo. And another thing is, one of the things Daniel said to me was, Mom, one of the most noblest things you can do is to raise an autistic like me. Don't think you have to do anything else. Just love me. Your love will help me complete my mission that I've come to Earth to do. Sounds like a little Martian. It's cute. I've come to Earth, but that's what he said. I've come to do. So, yeah. So it is. That's going back to what you said about, you know, the parenting. You know, just allowing and just loving. That's it. That's all Daniel said I needed. Your love, just so I could do my mission or complete my mission.
I'm so glad you touched on that. This is a good place to kind of close it up. On page 49, down in the bottom paragraph, Gayle says, I personally believe this date heralds Earth and galactic changes. Quoted on the galactic, I am anyway, already taking place that will eventually lead to the end of the world as we know it. As a visionary who believes that human consciousness can truly impact the course of history, I choose to envision this changing time scenario, whenever and however it might occur, as a fulfillment of God's promise to man for the dawning of a higher world order. As part of God's plan, our role is to embrace a spiritually driven purification process, to prepare for the full embodiment, through God's grace, of our fifth dimensional higher self, or Adam Kadmon, empowering us to become divine co-creators with spirit through higher levels of consciousness and love. And Lori actually made a little comment here. She said, love you guys, and the non-verbal autistics, so important. I mean, I think that just kind of wraps up and really highlights the message of today and what we've been talking about, that we need to listen to more of what these nonverbals have to say, and even just any of the autistics, because they have found their voices through technology and all the different, you know, modes, and also many people opening their hearts. I think that's the biggest part. I think that's the catalyst that has made it possible for them to have their voices and also to be here. You know, we look at the statistics of how many people are coming in autistic at this point, and you know, that's a whole nother thing as far as coming to this earth. That's something that we will eventually touch on some more. But they come here because they're able to be here. And that's something that I can understand from my heart, is the collective heart on this earth has opened up enough to receive that high vibrational frequency of pure love and light that they vibrate at. And so that's what's allowing them to be here in that capacity. And so if you can just think about that, think on that, and see what comes to you, because I think that there's so much wisdom that's out there for all of us to mine and bring forth and expand our hearts with, so that we can become those conscious divine co-creators, because we are co-creators already. We just aren't doing it consciously. And so the more we go within, the more we can recognize that what we do and say is powerful. And we can listen to those who are quiet and silent and learn.
Beautiful, Amy. And with that, I think that's the show. I really enjoyed being here today and having these beautiful discussions, and can't wait for us to come back and for chapter, what, 5 and 6?
Yep, 5 and 6 is next on the agenda. And Connie, you know, we didn't discuss when we were going to have our next show because we got on late. We were having technical difficulties. So it'll be within a week, if not 2 weeks. So I will actually edit this video and I will post it in here so that you guys can see that. Everything that I've mentioned as far as websites or any of that sort of thing, all of those links are always going to be in the description box below these videos on my YouTube channel. So if there's any additional information you want to find there, do that. Please subscribe and share and comment and get in that autism experience group and, you know, share your experiences, share your insights, because this isn't about just them, you know, and they'll say that to us. It's about us too. We do this together. We need each other for this. You know, it's a collaborative work of community, finding our way back into unity consciousness. So thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for being here with us, bringing that beautiful energy and backdrop of Sedona, Connie. I love you so much, and our hearts go out to Daniel, Lyrica, and Adri in their journeys. And if you want to find out more about how you can support them, there'll be information in the description below, but you can go to the website, AWEtizm.com, AWEtizm.com, and click on the New Earth Academy, and you can find out a little more of what they're doing and how you can support them. And that's a wrap.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Connie. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for watching. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.